All right, welcome to the latest BuffZone podcast, and I'm Brian Howell, and as you can see right there, Pat Rooney. Those of you watching it, those of you listening can't see it, but Pat, we haven't done this in a little while. We usually kind of don't do this much in the summer, but it's been a little while. But it's nice to talk to you again. We've talked to each other in person, things like that, but nice to talk to you on
Just
here again.
once.
So yeah, how's your? I mean, I know because we talk all the time. And like, how's your summer going? And you ready to get going for fall sports?
Definitely ready to get going. And good to see you too. The new look BuffZone podcast, if you
That's right.
will. Yeah, I admittedly took it slow over the summer. If folks were following me on Twitter, had to get a little procedure done on my hand. And so I kind of let you run the ship solo for a good chunk of the summer. Appreciate it. But yeah, been getting back in the swing of things and definitely good to get rolling here. Obviously, been out at football a few times. We have, as we're talking here, we have Media Day, the Fall Sports Media Day coming up on Friday. And yeah, it's time again. It's crazy how fast the time goes.
Yeah, and when we'll do this again next week, we'll kind of talk about media day and all that stuff, and and just to let fans know that if they're new to it, Pat and I are going to talk really all sports CU, and we're going to focus. Most of our discussions going to be on football and basketball, things like that, but we're also going to get you up to date on what's going on with other sports because there are other sports in Colorado, and so and later on this podcast we'll talk about some of those sports starting up and as well as some buffs in the Olympics, which I know you've been following, Pat. And but let's start with football because they're, I guess, 7-8 days into fall camp now, and we don't get to watch. We don't get to do interviews after most of them, or after half of them. But we gather what we can. What are your impressions so far from if you've watched well off videos or if you've listened to? I know you've been out to some of the press conferences as well, but any thoughts you have at this point?
Yeah, I'm just anxious to actually just see them in action. It'll be a very curious opener for a number of reasons on that Thursday night against North Dakota State. It's just hard, It's the hype train in the preseason, right? As you
Yeah.
said, we don't get to watch practice. It's impossible to know how they're really looking. We you have to take the coaches, I guess, at their face value about how exactly things are going on behind closed doors at practices. They have a chance to be better than last year, sure, but I'm not personally going to be convinced of it until we get to see it. They've completely kind of retooled the roster all over again. They're going to have one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12, undoubtedly in Shedeur Sanders, and that's going to be, good enough to keep them in most games, I think. But how much better they might be than last year, I certainly think they have a chance to be improved in some areas. But again, we just don't know until we see them in action later this month.
Yeah, it was funny. I did a spot on Birmingham radio earlier today as we're doing this, and they said, I said, well, are you limited to the same 15-20 minutes that you can see every day as we are? And I was like, I know. We get 0 minutes every day. And they're like, huh, really? And so, we don't even get that. But and so because of that, like you, I am anxious to see it. I believe that they are improved, especially, you know, uh, I think in the trenches, especially, but I think across the board they're improved. I'm not sure there's a position group I look at and say they're not better there. Running back is the one spot where, because it's a totally unproven room, I don't know if they're better. I just don't think they're worse. But I think on paper they're better everywhere. But you got to see it on the field, right?
Yeah, again, and you alluded to kind of one of the two key groups, and I kind of lumped them together just because they go hand in hand. That offensive line and the running back group. It'll be interesting. I think they'll be improved on the offensive line. Strictly by the very low bar of I don't think it could be worse, right? I mean, giving up the number of sacks that they did and never getting the running game going. But however, with the running game, we've talked in the past, I don't know how dedicated they were to trying to get the run game going. So I think it has a chance to be a more productive group of running backs that, I don't know if there's more raw talent in that room, but depending what they come out with, if there's more of a devotion to that run game. And I do think, like I said, the offense line almost has to be at least a little bit better, right?
Right.
So I think all those things combined, they certainly have a chance to be better in that area. But it kind of gets back to what, I kind of want to see it before start getting on the hype train about how much better they're going to be. The offensive line has to be. I did a show recently and I was talking about this. Do I think the offensive line will be better? Yes. Like I said, they almost have to be, but they have to be a lot better. I mean, just by leaps and bounds better if this team wants to compete for that kind of 7-5, 8-4 range and beyond as a football team this fall. A little bit of improvement over what we saw last year won't get that done.
Yeah, it's got to be significant. I don't think they necessarily even have to be one of the top 5 offensive lines in the pack or in the Big 12, but they can't be the worst. I think they've got to be at least a kind of a middle of the pack line, and we're going to see if they are. It's interesting because you pencil in, who the starters would be at this point, and they brought in 8 transfers with all this experience, and as I pencil in the starters, I'm thinking there's only 2 transfers I would put in as starters, because there's 2 guys that were here last year, one of which didn't get to play, Tyler Brown, who I think is going to be a big upgrade. And then you have the true freshman, Jordan Seaton, who 5-star tackle, is certainly all-world talent at that position, but he's a true freshman at the most important spot. And so there is that little bit of like, okay, how's the true freshman going to do there? He's even admitted this week, he talked to us and he said, yeah, he goes, I have some of my struggles and, but I'd rather have it now than in games. Well, he's got to figure that out by game time. And he's super talented. I think he will. But again, that's where you're looking at the offensive line and say, well, how much better will it be when you've got a true freshman and only 2 of those transfers that you brought in the starting lineup?
And is the depth better? I mean, I
Yeah.
know they have more bodies per se, but if they get knocked around a little bit, how often do we see the same 5 guys start all 12 games?
Yeah.
That's a big ask for any offensive line, and kudos to those who manage to get it done. But chances are you're going to need that 6th, 7th, even 8th lineman throughout the course of 12 games. Are those next guys in line going to be an upgrade over last year? Again, bar's pretty low if we keep alluding to last year, but even middle of a pack, as you said, and I agree with you. If that can be a middle of the pack offensive line, give Shedeur, a little bit more of a lease on life back there. Make sure he's not getting beat up as much back there.
Yeah.
That alone will be a vast improvement if they can be a middle of pack. But that's still a pretty significant jump. And I think they have to be a lot better through that maybe number 8 spot on the depth chart if they want to get that done.
Well, I will say, I think like this, whatever you put down as the first team, I think the group behind them is significantly better than what they had last year. I think, as bad as the offensive line was as a starting group, clearly the backups weren't much better. So I think I like their depth better. We'll just see how much better the starting group is. And I like him. I think there's some good guys in there. I think Tyler Brown's going to be a really good player. It was unfortunate he didn't get to play last year. I'm a big fan of Justin Mayers and what he can do. And, Hank Zelinskas, true freshman, started some last year at center. Only going to get better, you would think. And so, I think they should be better. But, we're going to find out. And there's a lot of people depending on them being good. Number 1 being number 2, Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah. Well played right there, Brian Howell. But yeah, and the other part of that equation, of course, especially getting back to the run game is, how much is there going to be a dedication to it? They always talk a good game about it. There was weeks they talked about it last year. Oh, we got to get that going, and they just don't.
Yeah.
So, and until we see this new look offense, getting on the field and showing us that there's a dedication to it, we'll have to see. So I don't think that happened. That didn't do the run game any favors last year. The
Right.
way there was just really a lack of attention to it, and just we've talked about this before, but there just seemed to be, it's probably why Sean Lewis was gone before the end of the year, right? There was just a disconnect there throughout the season. I mean, there was one week about midseason, and you might recall the week better than I, where Coach Deion Sanders said during the week that in regards to Dylan Edwards, he's just not a great between the tackles runner yet, and it's not a discredit to him. We got to find ways to use him on the outside and take advantage of his speed and all that. That was the context he said that. But then come the game a few days later, the very first play is Dylan Edwards up the middle for like a 1-yard loss, and
Right.
so there's plenty of examples like that through the year. But there was there seemed to be a systematic disconnect between what they kept saying they want to do and what Sean Lewis had done in his background coming here to see you, as opposed to what we actually happened once kickoff arrived.
Yeah, and I do think Pat Shermer wants to run the ball. Sean Lewis did too, but I think that the combination of Coach Sanders and Shador and everybody just kind of seeing what a lack of a run game, how much that hurt them last year, and the fact you got Pat Shermer who's got that NFL background. I feel like there's going to be more dedication to the run game. Again, I want to see it before I believe it, but I believe there's going to be or I think there's going to be more dedication to the run game, and who's going to be that guy, I don't know. I think there's some talent back there, but I sure hope they run the ball more, because I think that's a significant key to this offense being good this year, or maybe the difference between being good and great.
Yeah, I think they'll be good. I think Shador Sanders
Yeah,
alone will make them good, and they'll be
right.
able to score points in the receiving core. But to be really dangerous and again, kind of threaten for that, you know, upper portion of the Big 12, surpass the 7-5 and make something around that. They're going to need to be good at both. But hey, before we get off of football, let's turn to the other side of the ball real quick. Get your thoughts, because you've written a little bit about this during the preseason. I think one player I am intrigued about as far as newcomers and trenches is BJ Green on the defensive line. I think has a chance to be an impact player. Obviously, a great season at Arizona State last year. I'm more confident in that group on the defensive front being a marked improvement over last year than maybe I am with the offensive line at this stage. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way, but I agree with you. Like I would probably put more confidence in that defensive line being improved, because I mean, I've said it from the time he committed. I think BJ Green might be the most important transfer they got all offseason. I think he's a significant upgrade for them. They didn't have a guy like him last year. I think he's going to be really disruptive, and preseason all Big 12 pick for a reason, because he was pretty good at Arizona State. But it's more than him. Chidozie Nwankwo, I'm blanking on some of the names right now. Anquan Barnes from Alabama. You got all these guys that have come in here that've got experience on the defensive line, and I think it's only going to make guys like Shane Cokes better. Amari McNeil was really coming on last year. I think he'll be better because of it. I really like that group.
Yeah, I think defensively, as you know, I think they profile a little bit like the offense. The skill positions are, going to be the strength of the unit, right?
Yeah.
I think the secondary is going to be great. Obviously, Travis Hunter. I'm very intrigued to see how they kind of move him around, as they've alluded to since the spring, play him inside a little bit more. Let me ask you, Trevor Woods at linebacker. I love Trevor Woods. I think everybody who watches Trevor Woods loves Trevor Woods. You talked this, I think it was last week we saw him, and you talked about how he's bulked up to 210, which is great. I still feel like, especially with the great running backs in this conference, that he can get picked on in the run game a little bit. Against spread offenses, he'll be great. He'll be a great coverage linebacker, obviously, with that pedigree at safety in the background there.
Mm-hmm.
Worried he might get picked on a little bit against some of these run games. What do you think?
Yeah, well, he said 217 first off, so
217. All right,
yeah, so a little bit
for
different,
sure.
but I will
A little
say
better for sure.
Yeah, I feel better about 217 than his listed weight at 205. He's always been listed at 205, and I thought, and he even talked about he was under 200 the first time he played in a game at linebacker last year, which like wow, that's amazing to play inside linebacker at the Power 5 level at 198 pounds or whatever. I like him better at that 217, 15 range, but I just like him as a player. I think that I think he'll be good. You watch some of the videos though, and it's hard to tell who's going to be in that starting group. You see Levanta Bentley, sometimes first team, sometimes second team. You see, Nikai Hill Green is in there as well. There's different guys we've seen in there at linebacker that I'm not sure who's going to wind up being the guy. I think what helps Trevor is that I think they've got some depth there, and they can rotate in a little bit. And maybe if he's struggling a little bit with the run game, you rotate some of those guys in that might be a little bit stronger in the run game. But I think Trevor's going to be an impactful player.
I will say he seems like the kind of person and player that you don't really want to bet against him, right?
Right. Yeah.
I'm offering a question. It is a concern him getting picked on in the run game, but not necessarily sure that'll happen. You know, he seems to be the kind of guy that has a knack for making plays. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I just think he's a good football player, and it starts way back. His true freshman year, he didn't play a lot. But you probably remember this where, he blocks was it a field goal? I can't remember if it was a field goal or punt or whatever, but against Arizona and picks up and runs it back. And,
Right.
that was a huge play at that time. He didn't make a ton of plays early that year, but that was a big one once he got on the field. And so he's just shown this knack for big plays. He had a huge interception against TCU last year. He sealed the CSU game with an interception last year. And so I just think he's a good football player, and you want him on the field at some point. I don't count him out either. You know, certainly there's question marks as an undersized linebacker, but I don't count him out.
Well, definitely looking forward to. We're almost 3 weeks away here now, right? Not 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I was talking to you yesterday. My bad, but 3 weeks. I'm getting eager.
Yeah.
Eager to get out and see some games. But almost 3 weeks away. We'll, I'm sure, talk more about the team and our expectations as we go along here. But coming up on Fall Sports Media Day this week, we'll finally get to talk to the head man.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, most head coaches have talked at this point. Deion Sanders does things a little bit differently, and we've come to understand that. But we'll finally talk to him on Friday and get his thoughts on. And I kind of, in some ways, you like that. After day one of camp, it's like, what are coaches gonna say? It's day one. They're just getting things going. I like that we're gonna hear from him 2 weeks in, and just kind of what's your assessment basically at the end of week two. So I'm eager to hear what he has to say there. But yeah, it's gonna be an interesting year, and we might say that 4,000 times between now and the end of the year, but I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I talked recently about this, and whatever else is going on, it's nice that it's interesting, like you said, it's just interesting now. No matter what happens, it's just kind of interesting as opposed to just sloughing through another kind of losing season, And I don't know
Yeah.
how good a season they'll have, but I know it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and we're gonna wait until our show right before the North Dakota State game to do predictions, things like that.
Yeah.
So we'll move on from that, but let's move on to let's go Olympics, because that's going on right now. And there's some buffs that are in the Olympics, and some are done already, but one that you've covered is Val Constein. I want to mention real quick Gabby Thomas. No, it's not Thomas. Who is it? Gabby Scott. Gabby Scott, a former buff running for Puerto Rico. She's qualified into the semifinals in the 400 meters, I believe it is. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So she's in there. Yeah, but there's lots of buffs there. Derek White for men's basketball. Maya Hollingshed was there for the Puerto Rican women's basketball team. So there's some definitely some CU flavor in the Olympics.
As we speak, I'm going to have to jump off before too long because Val Constein in the final of the steeplechase is coming up here. Want to check that out for sure. Still being coached by Mark Wetmore and Heather Burrows. Pretty interesting. And media day, we'll get a chance to talk to the new guy for CU cross country, and John Carlson coming over from Tennessee. But yeah, fun to watch. I mean, Derek White's doing so well for the men's basketball team. What a summer that guy's had, right? Wins the NBA title, gets a huge contract extension, and now playing well, and hopefully on his way to a gold medal with Team USA. So fun to watch. We'll see how Val does in the finals. She finished 12th last time around at the Tokyo Games, and worth mentioning, not CU buffs, but a couple athletes you and I have covered in our time. Valerie Allman from Silver Creek, winning gold again in the discus. Just awesome to see. And Elise Cranny, boy, I watched that 5K. Elise Cranny from Niwot, and she was right there. But the Kenyans and the Ethiopians took off right at the end and kind of left everyone behind. It was a heck of a race, though. She winds up finishing 10th. But just how cool is it that our paper did a great job kind of covering the scene at Silver Creek High School, I felt like. So go check out the photos if you haven't seen them. But just really cool to see a couple of young girls from 10 years ago from the area competing on that stage. What a thrill.
Yeah, well, a good friend of ours, Jerry Valerio, who works at Max Preps, sent me a link the other day. Said, "Hey, back in the day, remember when you wrote this article on Valerie Allman for Max Preps, and it was 2012? Like, holy
Yeah,
cow,
yeah,
12 years ago." But yeah, I mean, Valerie, one of the nicest people I've ever covered, and I covered her entire high school career at Silver Creek High School when she was winning state titles, and just an awesome girl. And I actually, I remember because she went to Stanford. I interviewed her at one point. I was wearing a Cal shirt that I picked up at a trip to Berkeley at one point. Well, she was going to Stanford, and so a week later or so, she hand delivers to my house. She found my address, hand delivers a grad announcement and a Stanford T-shirt, and says, "You need to wear this thing now." So, yeah, but just an awesome girl, and it's so cool to see someone that you covered in high school develop to the point that not only one gold medal. She's the defending, two-time gold medalist. So that's pretty cool. And then Elise Cranny, I covered her quite a bit too. Didn't get the medal, but man, American women have never medaled in that 5K. In fact, another buff, Carrie Goucher. No, was she a buff? Yeah, she was a
yeah,
buff. Yeah, she was on the call for that
yeah,
race. Well, she's the American that's finished the highest in that race, and it was eighth. So
yeah,
yeah, Americans for I think you said 10th. I think Elise was 11th,
yeah.
if I'm not mistaken,
I
somewhere
think you're
around
right.
there. But either way, to be in there and top 10, 11 for the American women,
Yeah,
that's fantastic. And so
yeah,
it was pretty cool to see that.
yeah. And just for me, it kind of brought back, and I cover, a shout out also to the North Boulder Little League, who's playing as we speak or today,
Yeah.
uh, looking for a chance to play their way into Williamsport, and being able to do that story, and seeing, to me, they're still kids, right? Maybe you feel the same way, can still picture the both of them in high school, to see them, grown up and on that stage. It's, I don't know. It's kind of reassuring and really cool. Derek White too, with his journey from being overlooked out of high school to Division two UCCS, and sitting out at CU before getting to play 1 year. It's great to see, and it's
Mhm.
really cool to see them doing this on such a huge stage.
Yeah, it's really cool. And Derek White's certainly come a long way from that skinny kid at UCCS. So shout out to him, and great job for all those buffs. And moving on real quick, because I know you got to go watch Val. But Fall Sports Media Day is coming up. We're going to talk more about it as we go along this month. But women's soccer is getting going soon. Volleyball is getting going soon, and as you alluded to, the new cross country coach for the first time in 30 years. So those sports are getting started here soon as well.
Opening game for soccer is right around the corner, next Thursday, the 15th.
Mhm.
That night against Marquette. Should be a pretty good team for the Buffs this year. They basically got everyone back, including Shira James, who's coming back for an extra year. So they got a potent scorer up top. They've got, I wrote a little bit about, Ava Priest and the Leva twins kind of taking a step forward this year. They have a veteran goalie in Jordanitis. They kind of check all the boxes. BYU will be tough, obviously, in the Big 12. But I would expect the Buffs to be able to compete for an NCAA tournament bid again this year. They have kind of most of the team back from last year's team, so
Yeah.
they should be fun to watch under the lights at Prent next Thursday the 15th. Volleyball starts practice as we're talking on this Thursday on the 8th. They'll have their first practice, so their first game still a couple weeks out. A little different situation there. Setter Taylor Simpson is back, but they're going to have a lot of new faces. They also have a sophomore class that was freshmen last year. A couple of them played quite a bit by the end of the year. A couple of them were sitting behind their senior outside hitters. They have a few sophomores that they're really going to lean on this year. Might be a
Yeah.
bit of a retooling year for the program, but if they can keep this group together, looks like something they can kind of build on going into the Big 12. So they're getting going this week to start coverage with that, and that soccer
Yeah.
opener's right around the corner.
Well, if you're volleyball, you'd rather retool in the Big 12 than the old Pac 12, which is just
Yeah.
brutal in volleyball. I don't know how good the Big 12 is, but I know the Pac 12 was the best conference in the country. So, yeah.
The one thing Jesse Mahoney told me, I got a little story coming out setting up the preseason here, and works out well because I don't think I'm going to use this, but in kind of contrasting the two conferences, the Big 12 might be a little more lateral for volleyball than for soccer, women's soccer. I think of such a premier for both, but there's some pretty good programs in the Big 12. it takes a little bit of a knock without Oklahoma and Texas for women's volleyball, but still Kansas is usually pretty good. And but the difference, Jesse Money said, is there's no Stanford in Big 12. There's not
Yeah.
that perennial top 5 program, perennial conference champion program in the Big 12. As teams cycle through, the little guy has a little bit more of a chance year to year, maybe in the Big 12 than in the Pac 12. So looking forward to see, like all the other sports, looking forward to seeing the new teams and see how it shakes out for these squads. But as far as competing immediately, probably the women's soccer team has the edge in that going into this fall.
Yeah. Well, we'll look forward to seeing that. And, Pat and I'll be back next week and we'll chat more Buffs, with football going on and all the other fall sports, and maybe catch up on some basketball scheduling as well. And we might talk about that. But Pat, go enjoy watching Val Constein in the steeplechase, and we'll chat with you soon.
Yeah. Go USA, Brian Howell. And thanks for listening or watching, folks. A new twist on the BuffZone podcast, and we'll do this again soon.